shines bright and let my wings dry and fly away. No limits to the sky.
Thank you all for coming and for you joining online. We appreciate your views. Thank you very much. All right, so it's already 27 days into January, so by now we're probably letting all of those New Year's resolutions slowly fade into the distance, right? No? You're keeping them up? Good, good. Because actually, those New Year's resolutions where people want to have new diets or new fashion or trying to, make their bodies healthy and exercise, those are actually very much related to your life of faith, right? They are, right? And a lot of churches, they'll talk about being spiritual, but what is it to really be spiritual? Because if you don't have this body, you can't really be spiritual because those things are connected. And that's something that we study here in the Word Church. How exactly our bodies function and how are we actually connecting to God? So that is one of the things that kind of differentiates us in knowing how do we really engage in a life of faith here on this earth? How do we change ourselves to actually become people that really, really love God and do what God says? Because otherwise there wouldn't be any need for the Bible if we didn't have to do anything with these bodies on the earth, right? And speaking of change is among us. Change is all around us. And this is my transition. I'm leading into the next part of what I'm going to say. So change, at my workplace, they always have CNN just blaring into the kitchen, which is, I don't think this makes a very good eating environment. So I eat at my desk, but that's because I'm doing work, of course. I'm just really productive. It's not because I don't have friends or anything like that. Don't misunderstand me, okay? Anyway, I walk into the kitchen, I need to get some hot water and warm up my food and stuff, and so I'm checking the news, but I don't really watch the news too much because personally I think that, I'm not gonna go there. Personally, but I see on the news that there's been this government shutdown, whether you know much about it or nothing about it, there's a government shutdown, but there's a compromise that they reached. So everyone was getting their phones out, screenshotting, oh my gosh, they're finally coming to a compromise. It's been so long. I couldn't even travel because there weren't enough people at the airport to go through security. And I was like, gosh, what a mess. And so it's even though there's this compromise, it's tentative. It's only meant to last until they can come up with something better. And this happens so often, too, where we kind of want something to change and then take place immediately. That's kind of why New Year's resolutions fade off, because we want to become this new person, but it really takes time. And faith, too, it really does take a lot of time. And when you're putting in a new change in place, you're not always going to make every part of your life happy. And especially when you're in a position of leadership, you're not going to be able to make everyone happy. Now, this may be hard for you to do, but just imagine that you were Donald Trump for a second. And think of how much ridicule this man receives. I don't care whether you like him or not. I'm not trying to go there, but I'm just saying, for someone in leadership especially, because all of you, whether you believe it or not, you're leaders in some way, shape, or form. So how much ridicule and slander and blasphemy and crazy things can people say about you until you start to feel really discouraged and you just want to quit? You got to think at the end of the day, these leaders in history and, even for Donald Trump, that he's still going. He hasn't gotten discouraged and gone into his room and then just never came out. Somehow he always keeps coming out and does the same show. So it's you got to give him props at least for that. And when you think about people in the Bible too, there's this connection, these leaders that have something that they believe in so firmly that they're willing to risk their lives. And as Myung-Shim, as we just saw, or Shiloh, this is the Shiloh show, her Korean name is Myung-Shim, she was explaining about Joshua, right? And you gotta think, wow, this leader, he's in charge of all these Israelites, and they're supposed to go destroy 31 tribes to go get the promised land that God told them to do. And it's are you sure? Are you sure about that? All of them? Yeah, all of them. But they have way more people. They have way more weapons. Are you sure? And God's yeah. So how would you not get discouraged when even your own people are like doubting. Because ultimately, that's why the Israelites stayed in the desert for so long, is because they complained, they grumbled, they doubted that they were actually going to fulfill the promise that God made to them, getting to go into the promised land. So this is a big example, and it's hard to connect sometimes with daily life when we read about these instances in the Bible. So that's why we have to understand the principle and actually apply that to our lives. So in your daily life, how many times do you go through something where you just want to give up? In school, you can't give up because you fail, and no one wants to fail in anything that you do. So some purpose keeps you pushing forward. And even if that purpose is trying to just get past your next test, that purpose is what keeps you from becoming overly discouraged. Now, here's the difference, because anybody in the world can be successful. Anybody can. But why is it that we need God? This is the difference that it makes, because Galatians 6:9 says, who knows? Anybody know? Do not become weary, because the time is coming when you can reap everything that you have sown, and that is if you don't give up. So if you don't give up. And important thing here is if you don't give up, well, like, oh, I have to do everything? And this is why we have to like really pray every day. What is it that God wants you to do that you shouldn't give up on? Those are the things that you really have to see through to the end. And those are the things that we're going to talk more about tonight in this message about not getting discouraged, because really the difference is what God gives you that lasts so much longer than what we can just do for ourselves. Ultimately, anything that we do just ends with the body. And this is why we have to live as spiritual people, because that's what lasts in eternity. So with that little tidbit, that little intro, I'd like to invite up Pastor Sky to deliver tonight's message.
Good evening, everyone. Is it good afternoon? It's evening, yeah. It goes by how light or dark it is outside, right? All right. So, good evening, everyone. It's been a long time. I think it's been more than a month. Has it? It's about a month, right? So it feels really, I've never been so nervous speaking in front of people. I'm usually not nervous speaking in front of people. It's just been such a long time, and I don't know what you guys are expecting from me. Right? So you got to think about this like my first time again, so you got to give me a break, right? So today, because, I don't want to get discouraged. Ooh, right? Okay. So, yes, today's message is about discouragement, right? And I know that we just heard from Danny about discouragement and stuff. And I want to talk to you about this a little bit in more detail and kind of what we go through in our lives and what makes us discouraged, especially when it comes to us coming before God, okay? So today's title, once again, is Don't Be Discouraged. Why? Because God, the Holy Spirit, and the Lord, they will do it for us. Okay, that's today's title, right? Don't be discouraged, because God, the Holy Spirit, and the Lord will do it for us. Now, one disclaimer is, it doesn't literally mean they're going to do it for you. So I'm sorry. If you're really, really lazy and you don't want to do anything, it's not going to be like that, okay? I'm going to go step by step. I'm going to start with a little story because, no one has to do this because I know what the answer is going to be. Have you been to those motivational speakers are like, who here has been discouraged in their life? And it's like, duh, everyone has, right? Right? I'm the most discouraged person is probably him because he's got no seats around him. No one sitting around him. He can feel so discouraged at this time, right? I'm not even sure you came together, right? And you put a seat between the two of you. That's kind of weird, okay? So what's your name, by the way? Micah. That's a great name. Micah. Wow, okay. You got a great name and no one wants to sit next to you. Oh, there you go, right? What about Michelle? No? Okay, all right, cool. Just checking. Okay, so discouragement. I'm not going to ask you who's been discouraged. Why? Because it's something that everyone goes through in life no matter what. Now, I'm going to start with a story. Okay, it's a very interesting story. And I heard this story, and it's really, really discouraging. Okay, it's a discouraging story, right? And when you hear this, you'll be like, oh, it's so discouraging. And through this one story, we're going to go through all the different things, right, that kind of those things that make us discouraged. Okay. Now, of course, I'm not going to end it as a discouraging story, but let me start off. Okay. So, I've been pastoring for about almost 4 years now. Before that, I was a missionary for like 9 years. And before that, I really gave my life up to Christ about 21 years ago when I was a certain age. Just caught myself on that one, right? All right, when I was a certain age, I really gave myself up to Christ, right? And at that point, I'm like, yeah, this is what I really want to do. And what happened was, I have my senior pastor, and he's the one that trained me, took me through theology. He just knows the Bible inside and out, or kind of like. Don't get me wrong, but we'll just say like a mini Messiah, right? It's like he's just really, really amazing, right? And he's not that, but I'm like, wow, this guy's great. Now, he told me this crazy story, okay? And I want you to listen to this story and listen to it really well, because through this story, you're going to see all the different aspects of discouragement and where it comes from. So about 40 years ago, okay? So 40 years ago, he began ministry, like his ministry. Right, in the ministry he began, it's in South Korea. He began in the largest city. Everyone know the largest city in South Korea is? Seoul. Okay, everyone should know that, right? Yay. Okay, either way. Right, so it's Seoul, Korea. Okay, so Seoul, Korea, he starts his missions there, and the gospel, 40 years ago, we're thinking about South Korea. South Korea is, right now, it's super fervent, and it's it's a hot pot, of just Christianity. But you're talking decades and decades and decades ago. It's not a place where it's actually bubbling and boiling, right? Christianity didn't really enter into Korea until about 150 years ago, right? So we're going 40 years back, and of course, there's churches building and growing, and he starts this ministry 40 years ago. Starts in Seoul, okay, and it's starting to grow, and he's like, you know what, there's more than just Seoul in Korea. So he wants to go to a next biggest city. And the next biggest city he wants to go to is a port city called Busan. Okay? So he goes to Busan, but it's interesting because he's like, oh, we need to start the ministry over there. So some people said, oh, you know what? We sent out flyers. We have this and going. We have this auditorium, just this studio that's all rented out. And we have 300 people who will be coming to this, to listen to the gospel. 300 people, right? If you're someone who's preaching the gospel, 300 people is a lot of people, right? That's almost like 300 people more than we have here, right? So it's like wow, this is exciting, right? So it's like 300 people. So it's like, all right, it's like, anyone know how far the drive is from Seoul to Busan? 4 hours? Right, wow, says the Caucasian woman, right? Who's maybe been to Korea, right? 5 hours, okay, says the Korean woman in the back. Okay, cool, that makes more sense, right? It sounds like the Caucasian girl who's like barely 19, right? She can't know. Did you say 4? Oh, I'm sorry. The growth from 19 to 20, I forgot, right? Right, so, I'm not gonna ask how old you are. Okay, so either way, right? So what happens here is, you said 5 hour drive? 5 hour drive. And if it's 40 years ago, how many hours was it probably? Probably 6 hours. Okay, good. And okay, cool. All right, so it's like 6 hours. Okay, 6 hour drive. So he's driving all the way down there, and he's excited because there's going to be a studio full of people who want to hear the gospel of Christ. And he's like, yes! And he goes down. There's a driver, and there's a team that comes down with him. And he's like, okay, we're going to start the gospel in Busan. And he enters, walks into this studio. And there's less people than there are in here. Right? That's pretty hard, okay? There's 4. There's 4 people, right? So he's like, hey, guess what? Come drive 5 hours down to Busan. We have 300 people ready for you. You got to come just preach the gospel, spread the ministry of Christ, right? He's like, yes. And he goes down and he enters this huge studio that could fit more than 300 people, and there's 4. So if there's 4 people, what's the first thing you're thinking is like, who are the people that told me there's 300, right? I gotta find these people. Whoa, where is this coming from, right? So it's like, where? 4. And it's not just 4 people. He said they're like the kids. Like one in high school, right? No one in high school here, right? Okay, good, right? Oh, sorry. All right. So these mature younglings, right? Right? So the very mature younglings. There's a person in high school, and there's 2 sisters, and it's like, think about it, they're sisters, so it's like they're kind of like one person. because they come together, right? You know, they're always holding on to each other. So it's like, you know, it's like one person, only like three, but there's four, okay? So there's four people, and can you imagine the discouragement? He says, I have never been so discouraged. I was so discouraged. Only four people out of 300 said they'd come, and only four people came. And he thought to himself, you know what? I brought, like, you know, back then you don't have like these TVs with PPTs and stuff. So he has these charts that have been like printed out that are almost like wall size. I've seen them before. It's like from the ground all the way almost to the roof, to the beam. And he's got like what do you call those things? Pointing sticks, right? Yeah, that's my generation, right? So it's the pointing sticks. There's not even like a red laser thing, right? I don't know what you call those, right? So it's a pointing stick. This is what he's doing with a pointing stick, right? He brought all these charts. He brought like you know, when like you're going to war, you brought the entire arsenal. You brought the tanks, you brought the planes, you brought everything. And then there's like four people. It's like going to war, bringing your tanks, and it's like four kids like, hi, right? And he's like, what's going on? And he said to himself, like, oh, gosh, is this it? Is this what it is? And he begins to preach. Now, this is not just the most discouraging part is like in the middle of the lecture, okay? You know, you got to think about this. In the middle of a lecture, emergency call. So in the middle of the lecture, someone's like, phone call, you got to get the phone. He's like right now? Like during the lecture? And he goes and gets the phone. And it's his driver. His driver got into a car accident. Why? He's like, wait, aren't you supposed to be here? And he realized that his driver was also discouraged that you're expecting hundreds and only four came. And he went off to drive. And in that condition, he got into a car accident. The car was totaled. So now he's sitting there like, great, there's four people, and my car is totaled, and I'm gonna go back, right? And he's like, what should I do? And like, you know, you're in the middle of a lecture, you can't be like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, okay, you know, take it to the shop, you know, I guess get it done. And can you imagine, after that phone call, you're like, right? And you kind of go back here, and when he gets back, one of the people have already left. So now the four turns to three, right? Again, there's the sisters. One of the sisters left, right? So now you're like, wait a second, I expected 300, only four people came. Then again, to car accident, I don't have a car, and I come back, and one person's left. What's going on? And you got to think to yourself, what the heck is going on, right? Imagine you in this situation, right? When you're like, well, it just doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. And we've all been through this type of situation where discouragement begins to settle into our hearts and we think that, oh, is this real? Oh my gosh. Now, this story hasn't ended yet because we're going to go to the ending a little bit later. But what I want to do is I want to go into three main parts of things or reasons why a lot of us will get discouraged going through these little things that happen in our life. Okay? Now, the very first thing I want you to understand is one of the biggest reasons, and we'll see from this story, that we get discouraged. And I want you to understand this and think deeply in your hearts and reflect back right now when you get disappointed or discouraged. It is because of expectation, right? The expectation is supposed to be 300 people. But the interesting thing is, even though it's 300 people, only 4 people came. And the reality to what is really, really what you expected is so far off, it begins to discourage your hearts. Now, this happens not just in your life of faith, but it happens in every part and every aspect of your life. Like, what did you expect when you got a new job? Or what did you expect on a test that you really studied hard for? Right? What did you expect? What was your expectations when you come to believe in God? How much is supposed to get better? Right? Isn't it like I believe in God, but why is my life still the same? Why isn't it any better than before? Why don't I get any answers? Why is it I get into something, oh, I got this new job, I got this new role at the church, and things are still kind of the same as they were before. One of the biggest things that kind of confront us in our daily lives is the expectation that you have for God in your life. Right? Now, I'm not going to say they're wrong, but I'm saying the expectation is not quite what you think it is. What does that mean? Expectation means what? God wants you to have expectation, and He wants you to believe that your problems will be solved, and He wants you to believe that you'll get better, your life will get better. He wants all you to have the greatest of greatest expectations. Why? Because it's God. You gotta think about this. If it's God who's giving you this hope, if it's God that's giving you all these thoughts in your mind about problems being solved, doing better things in your life, shouldn't, of all people that you believe or have expectations in, shouldn't it be for like when it's God? Shouldn't He be like the number one person? If there's anyone to have the perfect, most ideal expectations, shouldn't it be God? And the answer is yes. It's true. You should have the most ideal expectations. And when we go through our lives and we see the different things and difficulties that happen, and it's not quite what you expect, why is it like this is the number one question. The question isn't, God, why aren't there 300, 3,000, 30,000, 4 million, 10 billion people in this room to listen to the words of God? And God says, there will be. And just as Danny spoke today is, people stop along the way. Your expectations are correct and they are right. It will happen. These things God tells you, if it's God, don't you think you think God's gonna lie to you? The difference is not about when it happens. It is guaranteed to happen. And the only difference is have you waited for it or not? Expectation for God is okay. And you can have the highest, greatest, most powerful expectations. But you need to also realize is that God, when He gives you those hopes, those aspirations, and those expectations of these problems to be solved, it doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. We have to learn, and this is why we have to learn about God. Learning about, if there was no such thing as some process of our problems being solved, then none of us would actually have to learn about God. Why? Because if you didn't need to learn, because He's like, boom, it's done. Boom, bam, bam. Look at all these problems just being solved each and every day. But how many times you go to church and you see like people like getting healed every single service? Cancer, boom. Headache, boom. Backache, boom. Bad hair, boom, right? Boom, boom. You know, you need more fashion sense, boom, right? Boom, boom. You saw, it's like you don't see that happening every single day at church or every single week. It doesn't happen that way, right? But what God does is, God is the one that allows for these things to happen in your life, and you have to wait for them, right? You have to go through the process and go through it and wait till the end, and at the end is when your expectations will be met. The reason why people have never met their expectations is because they stopped along the way. Oh no, God will never do this. And the answer is no, He will do it. It's just that you stopped. Remember that video we saw with the Shiloh show about the sun stopping? You know what actually stopped? Your brain. It's true. It's not the sun that stopped. It's actually your brain that stops functioning because you're like, oh, okay, well, that's the way it is. And what we do is when we read the Bible, we have these expectations of God. All of a sudden, our brain stops functioning. We just think, all right, well, that's it. Well, God said it, so obviously it's gone. Okay, well, my brain stopped, right? So kind of what we do. It's not the sun that stops. It's your brain that stops. People stop thinking. People start thinking in this really weird way. It's really weird. Number one is, expectations will be met. The problem is you never wait for them. What's the second problem? Second problem is in the middle of the lecture, what happened? Oh, no, there's something else. Car crash, okay? Now, in the middle of the lesson, we have a car crash, right? Now, one of the interesting things about human beings, especially when it comes to people who believe in God is we think that the moment something bad happens, it's like, is this God's will? Like the moment something bad's like, wait, is God saying I shouldn't do this? Right? It's almost like learning how to walk, falling over and saying, does God not want me to walk? Right? It's like, is that reason? You gotta think about how interesting that is. Is that the moment something bad happens is the moment you start thinking to yourself that this is what God doesn't want this. God doesn't want this. Why? Because something bad happened. It's what happens to us in our daily lives too. Whether it's your prayer, it's like, oh, I can't think very well. Does that mean you stop praying? Oh, I'm so tired. Does that mean you stop praying? No. When difficult times come, it's not that God doesn't want you to do it, right? When difficult times come, what does that mean? It means it's worth that much more. It's worth it. Every single thing you've seen in your life right now, how much of it has taken, like how many valuable things take no effort? Like absolutely no effort. Like even food. Like who thinks McDonald's is like the best food you've ever tasted? Like gourmet cuisine. Oh, please, Micah, don't put your hand up. Please, God, right? I'm like, that's why no one's around you. No, I'm just kidding, right? Huh? Big Rib is pretty good, but it's no longer available. Right? It's no longer available, right? What is the best food? The best food is what food? Homemade, but not just from you. From who? From your mom. And why is it so amazing from your mom? No, psychologically speaking, you grew up with it and your taste buds formed towards that type of taste and that's why you like it. Just kidding. Okay, just kidding. Well, not kind of kidding, but yeah, kind of maybe. Okay, whatever it is, right? Okay, so either way, right? So let's go to your answer. It's love. Okay, right? So it's because of love, right? It is. And because they love you, it's not that the taste is love. It's not the taste being love, right? It's the love that allows them to take their time and make it from scratch. And, they cut up the vegetables, right? And then they put it together. And, sometimes you have, my mom would spend 4 hours just making food. Last time I visited my parents was 2017. And I went to Vancouver, Canada, because that's where I'm from, Canada. So I got to plug it in right now. Welcome to Canada. Either way, okay, so my mom, right, so my mom made this food for me. The crazy part is this. She doesn't cook as long as before, but then I realized she cooks longer. I'm like, what? She's like, oh, I made some stuff from yesterday. I'm like, all right, well, yesterday? And she's like, yeah, we'll just heat it up, right? And she puts it in the pot, and I'm like, okay. She's like, I got some lettuce and this. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And then she looks at me and says, do you know where I got, no, my mom doesn't talk like that. But you know where I got the lettuce? All right, she doesn't say that. She's like, oh, I can't, it's a Korean accent, so I can't really do it. So she's like, you know where I got the lettuce? And I'm like Safeway or Sam's Club? Or what do you mean? Where'd you get the lettuce? She's like, I grew it in the back. I got the tomatoes. I'm like, you grew it in the back, right? Right? And she grew the tomatoes. She grew the spinach leaves. She grew the lettuce. And she's growing everything in the back. I'm like, Mom, are you trying to kill me? No, I'm just kidding, right? So I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So my mom is now spending even more time cooking, right? She's growing it and going outside every single day, protecting it, putting this greenhouse stuff all over it. And I'm like, wow, this is so crazy. And when you think about this, it's the food just tastes better. It just tastes better. This was from my mom, right? And because of that love, right, this cooking is just so amazing. It's slow cooked and it's healthy and you eat it and you love it. You can't help it. Good things take longer. Good things take more effort. What schools do we have around here? We have a bunch of different schools around here, right? So there's name me some schools. Columbia's one. Okay, what else? A new school? Cool. What else? Hunter. What else? Baruch. What else? John Jay. What else? How many schools did you go to? Good gosh, right? Right? I transferred after one semester to here, and then there, right? So I'm like, okay, right? Okay, so, what was I saying? Which school? Now, why did I say that? I forgot. Huh? There you go. It doesn't help. Okay, so, I got it now. Okay, so let's just say Columbia, because I know Angela. We just met. You started coming to our church since August, right? No, August, right? Now, August. Now, let's take a look at all the different schools and say Columbia is part of because Patrick in the back, Minister Patrick is also from Columbia, alumni, right? And he, it's an Ivy League school, correct, right? And what is the base, the minimum SAT score you need, or ACT? Which one was the other one called? Yeah, I don't even know what that means, but it's like ACT, SAT, all these scores, and there's a minimum weight, the minimum thing you need to get in, right? Now, if you're going to like an Ivy League school, like a Harvard and like not MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Cornell, Brown, anywhere in there, right? Because it's an Ivy League, what happens is the standard to get in is much higher. It is much higher, right? Just like if you want to eat at a nice steakhouse, the price is much higher. And if I go to McDonald's, right now it's 2 for $5 for a Big Mac, quarter pounder with cheese, 10-piece chicken nuggets, or filet o fish. But either way, right? I wouldn't know that. Okay, so if you see the difference between the two, there is a difference, right? There is a difference. The harder it is, right, it means that it's something that is much better and greater, right? And that's the thing that we have to think in our heads is, what we're looking for is like the things that are difficult. If you want to buy a Mercedes-Benz, it takes more time to get the money. If you want to buy a Fiat for $15,000, you could probably steal. No, I'm just kidding. This church, right? Not stealing. What would you do to get $15,000? You would buy, sell drugs, all right? Just kidding. But borrow, beg your parents, or you get a job, and it's very, very easy to buy. But the more and more expensive it is, the more and more difficult it is for you to actually attain that thing. The way we see how life is in this world, everything that is difficult, everything that is more valuable, it is harder to get. You have to put more into it, right? And the thing you have to understand here is, when that car crashed, what happens is we think that, oh, God doesn't want this anymore. Or another thing that creeps into your mind, which is like even a harder level, is you start thinking to yourself that, you see, this is why I don't want to do it. And the third thing I'm talking about here, when it comes to not just one of the people leaving during the lecture, is in our hearts, we don't want to go through difficulty. You just don't want to go through it. How many times have you said, it never works? That's impossible. Oh, we tried it before. It's always the same. It's always the same, right? It's basically people giving up on something they could possibly do. It's almost like this. If you guys really, really, really wanted to do something, can anyone really say that they exhausted all options? Or how many of these things that you actually gave up on in your life that you actually sat down for like 1 hour and said, how much do I think I could really do this or not? And you really thought about it. You were brainstorming, trying to figure out how it's supposed to happen. Most people think for about 2-3 minutes, and they say, no, forget it. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. You see, 3 things that really kill people and that discourage people the most. Number 1 is your expectations, right? Or how the expectations are fulfilled, especially between you and God, is unrealistic. Number 2 is you think that when a difficult thing happens, you think that, oh, maybe it's not meant to be, which is really weird. And the third thing is you think to yourself, it's an excuse for me to just give up because I just don't want to go through difficult things. Life we live right now, is it difficult or is it easy? It's difficult. And now here, we're going to go one step further. Even if you give up in life, even if you don't want to work that hard, is life any easier? It's not, right? Have you guys ever thought about that? It's like, you know what? Oh, I hate being single. It's too hard. I'm going to get a wife. You get a wife. It's harder. What's going on? I'm going to get a divorce. I'm single, right? And what happens is whatever choice you make, it's all difficult. Have you ever realized that in your life? That no matter what choice you make, it's difficult? Right? It makes no difference, right? Oh, I want to play first piano or second piano. Guess what? They're both hard. They're both hard, right? Right, oh, I'm 19 right now, but when I hit 20, it's going to be so much better. Is it easier? It's just as hard, right? When I hit, okay. I got to keep reminding myself I'm a pastor. When I hit 40 this year, right? When I hit 40 this year, I'm thinking to myself, life should be easier because I have 40 years under my belt, right? And the only thing under my belt is like an extra layer, right? All right? It's harder. Life is hard. It's the same. There's nothing different. There's nothing better, right? Principles, life doesn't change because you gained an extra year. It doesn't change. Just because you got a better job doesn't mean that you're good. It doesn't mean like the world turns upside down. It's the same world, same principles, same things are going to happen. But we have this expectation that things are supposed to be better. But they're not. And then we get discouraged. What we need to realize is, how do I overcome this discouragement, right? And especially I'm talking to people who have faith, and if those of you who don't have faith, I'm going to give you some good advice today about how do I overcome this. Now, number one is, it's not about having cheerleaders. Like, go, 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 go. And you're like, yeah, I can do it. Why? Because even if you have cheerleaders that are encouraging you every single day, they're not going to be with you all the time. It's not about, cheerleading, it's not about having a cheerleader or people always calling you. Why? Because then you start to rely on these people that are not always going to be there for you. Number one, more than anything else, the very first thing you have to do is you have to open up the opportunity for God to inspire you. That's the number one thing, right? You have to open up the opportunity for God to inspire your heart. What does that mean? You have to be immersed in prayer and the Word. What does that mean? Like, what do you mean it opens up the opportunity? It's like getting a job. If you want to get a job, and there's a huge difference between sending out 200 resumes to 200 jobs or sending out one or two. You're opening up opportunities to get an opportunity to get a job, right? There's an opportunity. When it comes to us and God, too many times when you're not doing well, you go away from church, away from opportunity, away from inspiration, away from the motivation that God comes into your heart and says, no, let's do it again. Because you stop going and instead you go off into the world where everyone's saying, no, 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 you can't do this. They block you all the time. You have to open the opportunities for God to talk and work in your life. When it's more difficult, you have to go towards God to get the opportunity to be inspired by the words of God. That's why we're here at church. That's why we go every Sunday. It is an opportunity for God to speak directly into your brain and your hearts. It may not happen every week, it may not happen during the entire sermon, but there'll be that one moment where God says, yes, this is it. And the inspiration floods you. It floods inside your heart and say, okay, I'm going to do this. You have to make yourself available to opportunity so God can inspire. God can give you an answer. God can give you strength. God can give you power. You have to give yourself a chance. It's not something that's going to happen. I guarantee you right now, some of you are probably not even inspired right now. And that's fine, but you gave yourself the opportunity to. The second thing that's really, really important that I want you to realize about overcoming discouragement is what? Is not just praying, and it's not just listening to the words of God and opening yourself up for opportunity, is the second part of getting a job. The second part of getting a job is not so much about just getting like 15 to 20 to 35 different opportunities. It's what do you do after that, which is even more important. Because the person who sends out 3 resumes and gets 1 opportunity, then goes to the interview and gets the job, is far better than someone who puts out 200 resumes, gets 50 different opportunities, but never goes out to an interview. The second part is what? Is not just listening and receiving the words and being inspired in your heart. The part that everyone misses out on is what? Is what do you do when you get the inspiration? They say one thing, this is an interesting thing. It's not just about people in church, not just about people, it's about people in all walks of life. Interesting thing is this, they say the most successful people in the world, whether physical, spiritual, mental, whatever it is, the interesting thing about people who are really, really successful is, this interesting part is, everyone gets inspiration and ideas. Everyone gets it. Everyone gets it. We're like, oh, that's so great. The difference between a successful person and an unsuccessful person is what? They actually do it right away. So if someone says, you know what? I got to start listening to the words of God. The successful person right after comes and says, here's my schedule book and this day I'm available. I want you to fill this in right now. That's a successful person. But everyone else is in the same boat as, oh, I really want to do it. So what do you want to do after? You want to go eat? Okay, wait, let's go to here. Let's go get a steak and this, and this. And this is what happens. Just go off and do something else. Successful people, Everyone gets the inspiration, but the successful ones are the ones that do something right away. It's about action and doing the words of God. And this is where your power and that inspiration becomes more and more powerful. Why? It's like in anything you do. When you start to learn how to ride a bike, you know what the most exciting thing is when they take off the training wheels. And you're only on that bike for like 4 seconds by yourself, but it's the most exhilarating rush you've ever had. And then you go for 10 seconds. And then your dad is like running together with you. Then you ride bikes with your dad and your mom. And then you go further places, you go fast, you do jumps, you do all these crazy other things like this, right? And what happens is it's exhilarating because when you do it, you see the improvement, what's happening, what's better. But if you don't do anything, you have no idea how good or how great it is. Whether it comes to prayer, if you don't think prayer is powerful or great, it means you've never prayed. If you don't know how exhilarating and amazing evangelism is to bring someone to Christ, it means you've never brought someone to Christ. If you don't know how it feels to have the words of God hit you so deeply in your heart that your heart is ready to explode and tears come out of your eyes, then you've never really listened to the words of God. That's all it is. That's all it is. We come here because it is an opportunity for God to speak to us. And that's why we come every week. Some people come every day. If you don't want to be discouraged, what do you have to do? You have to open yourself to the opportunity. And once you get it, you have to do something about it. And this is how discouragement goes away. This last thing I want to talk to you about today is this, right? Last thing I want to talk to you about today is this. Is what happened to those 3 people in the story, okay? So I was listening to this sermon, and Pastor Joshua was telling me, like, hey, so these 3, 4 turned to 3, a car accident happened, all these other things. I was so discouraged. And then, everyone's kind of like, are you really going to end it there? And that's my life. And then he just walks on, right? So we're kind of sitting like going, is it really going to end there? And he says, no. But guess what? Those 3 people brought another 15 people. And then those people brought more people. And now 40 years later, well, probably less than 40 years later, right? It's probably about 30 to 35 years later. There's 7 large churches in Busan, right? And it's thousands of people. And just recently within the last 2 years, they bought a church that's 10-story, a building that's 10 stories, right? And not only is it for just a church, but they're able to do like church businesses in there. They get rented out and make money off it too. But they just bought a 10-story building after 35 years. And I said, well, what about those 3 people? Do you know anything about those 3 people? He says, oh, there's one person in there, and this person is still here today. They're married, they're a family, they're one of the pillars of the family department, and they're still here running in Busan. And that's those who wait till the end. Right? You have to wait till the end of the story. Those of you who leave in the middle of the sermon will probably think, man, this is the dumbest sermon I've ever heard, right? I'm just more discouraged after leaving, right? But if you stay to the end, you see that those 3 people brought 15, then brought more, and then brought more. You have thousands of people in 7 churches, a 10-story building. That's what happens when you have expectations from God. That's true expectation. And to be honest, Pastor Joshua was like, I never expected that much. Right? It's more than your expectations. What God gives, this is the very, very last thing I tell you. Why is it so good to receive something small from God? Why do you think it's so good to receive something small from God? What do you think? Anyone? Why is it so good to receive something small from God? Okay, that's good. Answer is correct. It is correct. It's not the one I was looking for, but it's correct. You're a very mature high school student. All right. Micah, what do you think? Why is it so good? He gives you help to keep on going. Anything else, Jamie? It encourages you? Cool. Okay, now I'm gonna tell you why this might seem a little bit physical, but let me give you a small example just to show you why it's so great to receive something small from God. So let's say there's 2 mice. Okay, 2 mice are eating cheese. Okay, or I'm eating cheese by myself. Okay, right? Then another mice kind of scoots over towards me, and he says, "Hey, can I have some cheese?" I'm like, "Sure." So I break off a piece of this cheese, right? And I give it to the other mouse. And the mouse gets, "Wow, thank you so much for this cheese." and starts eating the cheese, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. Now, that's from mouse to mouse. Now, let's just say that there's a tiger. And a tiger's sitting there like, right? It's like, oh, elephant, antelope, whatever it is, and then the same mouse comes over, and the mouse comes over and says, hey, can I have a piece? He'd be like, and how big is that piece of meat? The mouse has to eat his way out, right? It's so big. Why? Because the larger the animal, the larger the being is, that small piece is so much greater than what a mouse can give to a mouse. When God, who is the almighty, all-powerful, omniscient, omnipotent being, who is trillions and quadrillions, and I don't even know what words to use of how much greater he is than a human being, if God gives you like a speck of dust, it'll crush the earth. That's what's gonna happen. Why? Because he's that much greater. What God gives to us is so much greater than what any human being can give to you. And to God, it might be small, but to us, it's like having our own church building in the center of Times Square. That's what it's like. And to God, it's this small thing. He's like going, sure, you want a pebble? Here, I got it from my pocket here, boom, right? And you're like going, oh, and it just lands in Times Square. It's like this really nice church. You're like, oh, thank you for the pebble. Whoa, my gosh, right? And that's the difference, right? If you ask people for help, I was like, hey, can you help me out? He buys me a bubble tea, right? That's all he does. He just buys me a bubble tea and it's done, right? I'm like, oh, thank you so much. You helped me for 4 minutes, right? But when it comes to someone greater and bigger, it's very interesting. Hey, Halloween, who here went out for Halloween? Just checking. No one went out for Halloween? No? Okay, sorry. So everyone's really good Christian people? Okay. So I never went out for Halloween, so I'm gonna go to my next example. Okay, now when you're doing Halloween, what kind of candies do people usually give you? The small bite-sized one, right? But isn't there like that place where everyone goes because what do they know? Oh my goodness. You go to like a little nicer area and they give like the bigger, we in Canada have the O. Henrys, the Crunch Bars, we have the Milky Ways. It's huge. And everyone kind of like goes towards there and like does rounds and goes like 2 or 3 times just to fill their bags up, right? Why? Because when you go to a bigger place or a better place, they give you, it's the same thing, right? But they give you, it's small to them, but it's much bigger, right? It's the same thing, right? We have to realize this in our life too, is that, yeah, all these other different things, the greater and the bigger it is, if a king gives you a gift and it's something really small, it's probably worth like $1 million. But if Mark gives me something small, it's probably worth like $2, right? Yeah. God is so great and amazing. He is so big. The things you want to receive, don't pray for things from people. Pray for things from God. And when you pray for things from God, this is when you see amazing and great things happen. So I have all of us here too. First sermon back after a month, right? I'm really happy it's over, all right? I'm really happy because God pulled me through the whole thing. But I also hope that everyone here too, when you realize all the discouragements that you're going through, or, it's like we're talking about New Year's resolutions, probably most of them we broke within the first week, right? And a lot of different things that we haven't really done the way that we really wanted to. And what God is saying to you today is, yes, you could be discouraged right now, but I want you to think differently, right? I want you to have expectation, but I want you to have the right expectation. And I want you to keep asking even for just the smallest thing from God. And it'll be so much different, so much greater and bigger than anything a person can give you. So let's just close our eyes for a few moments. And I'm going to pray. Almighty God, we're very grateful. We're very thankful that you brought all of us here today. There is a message that all of us needed to hear. And as we go through this new year of 2019, some of us could be thinking of hope that this new year will be better. Some people could actually think it's another year, I'm older. But God, it's not about any of these things around us, and it's not even about us. It is, what will you, God, the Almighty God, do for us this year? What am I expecting from you? And if we pray this prayer, and if we hear the words and allow the opportunity for your words to strike our hearts, great and amazing things will happen. So I pray that you'll bless every person here. Give them the inspiration to take action and move forward. And I pray that if there's any discouragement in their life right now, we will pray for each other, that you will encourage our hearts, and that we'll open ourselves up in prayer and word so that you can speak to us at this moment. We thank you so much for all that you've done. We pray all these things in the name of our wonderful living Lord Christ. Amen.
He can take you where you wanna go. He can take you where you wanna go. He can take you where you wanna go. He can show you what you wanna know.